You thought I was too busy to notice, yet I spent $2 million to send you to jail.
Angela Torres made $3 million in 6 months. All she had to do was befriend a lonely elderly woman during a pandemic, convince her to change her will, and wait for her to die. It worked perfectly. The old woman was dead, the money was hers, and the daughter, a quiet marketing executive from California, seemed harmless. At the funeral reception, Angela made small talk with the daughter. "Your mother was so proud of you," Angela said. "She always talked about her daughter, who works in marketing." The daughter nodded politely, her face calm and emotionless. What Angela didn't know, what she never thought to check, was that the marketing executive from California was actually worth $500 million. And in exactly 7 months, that billionaire daughter would spend $2 million of her own money to send Angela to prison for 18 years. This is the story of what happens when you steal from the wrong family. Because Angela Torres thought she'd gotten away with murder, she was wrong. Over the next 30 minutes, you're going to hear a story that will make you question everything you think you know about power, revenge, and justice. How did a serial scammer steal from 9 elderly women without getting caught for 8 years? Why didn't the billionaire daughter notice what was happening to her mother 3,000 miles away? And what made Angela Torres finally realize she'd made the biggest mistake of her life? But here's the real question. When a billionaire wants revenge, do you even need the police? Because what Jennifer Harrison did to Angela Torres wasn't just justice. It was personal. It was calculated. And it cost $2 million to execute perfectly. This is how she did it. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Margaret Harrison lived the kind of life most people work their whole lives to achieve. At 72 years old, she had a paid-off home in Westport, Connecticut, a pension from 30 years as a school principal, and nearly $3 million in savings and investments. She'd raised 3 children, buried a husband she'd loved for 43 years, and built a life she was proud of. Her daughter Jennifer had moved to California for work. They talked twice a week. Jennifer sent expensive gifts, and she visited twice a year. Margaret always said the same thing. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. You have your own life." And Jennifer believed her. Then the pandemic hit in March of 2020, and Margaret Harrison's carefully constructed world collapsed overnight. Her bridge club canceled indefinitely, her church went online, and her neighbors kept their distance. For the first time in her life, Margaret was truly, desperately alone. And that's when the predator arrived. Angela Torres was 43 years old when she knocked on Margaret Harrison's door in late April of 2020. She looked exactly like what she claimed to be, a kind, caring home health aide who wanted to help during difficult times. She brought groceries, wore a mask, and spoke with genuine warmth about how we all needed to look out for each other during lockdown. Margaret was touched by the gesture. In a world that had suddenly become cold and distant, here was someone who actually cared. But Angela Torres wasn't what she seemed. Over the past 8 years, she'd perfected a method that had worked 4 times already. Find a lonely elderly widow during a vulnerable time. Gain her trust through small acts of kindness. Move into her home by claiming financial hardship. Slowly isolate her from friends and family. Take control of her finances through joint bank accounts and power of attorney. Rewrite her will to make yourself the primary beneficiary. And then wait for her to die. Between 2018 and 2021, Angela had executed this plan 4 times in 4 different states. Dorothy Klein in Sarasota, Florida died in March 2018 and left Angela $1.8 million. Patricia Chun in Scottsdale, Arizona died in August 2019 and left her $2.1 million. Susan Foster in Austin, Texas died in November 2019 and left her $2.4 million. Barbara Williams in Portland, Oregon died in March 2020 and left her $1.9 million. Every single one had died within 6 to 8 months of Angela moving into their homes. Every single death was ruled natural causes. And every single one had left Angela everything. Margaret Harrison was about to become victim number 5. 3,000 miles away in San Francisco, Jennifer Harrison was building an empire that her mother knew nothing about. At 48 years old, Jennifer wasn't running a small marketing business like her mother believed. She was the founder and CEO of Harrison Global, a $500 million marketing empire with clients in 30 countries and offices on 4 continents. Forbes had ranked her net worth at $500 million. Wall Street called her the shark because of her reputation for crushing competitors and dominating markets with ruthless efficiency. She destroyed hostile takeovers, fired incompetent executives, and built her company from nothing through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. But Jennifer kept her business life completely separate from her personal life. To her mother and her mother's friends, she was just Jenny who works in marketing and lives in California. Margaret would tell people that her daughter had a little company out in San Francisco and was always so busy with work. Margaret had no idea her daughter was worth $500 million, and Jennifer preferred it that way. It meant less pressure, less expectation, and less guilt about being 3,000 miles away from her aging mother. What Jennifer didn't know was that while she was signing billion-dollar contracts and appearing on magazine covers, someone was systematically taking control of her mother's life. And by the time she found out, it would already be too late. Angela Torres moved quickly once she had her foot in the door. The first week was just groceries and friendly conversation. The second week, she started sharing personal stories about her own struggles, a mother dying of cancer in Florida, an abusive ex-husband, mounting bills she couldn't pay. By the third week, Angela mentioned that her lease was ending and she didn't know where she was going to go. Margaret, who'd spent her entire career helping people and couldn't stand to see someone in need, made the offer Angela had been waiting for. "You can stay in my guest room," Margaret said, "just until you get back on your feet." Angela moved in during the first week of August 2020 with 2 suitcases and tears of gratitude. Over the next 3 months, Angela executed her plan with surgical precision. She started screening Margaret's phone calls, saying she was napping when Jennifer called from California. She intercepted the mail before Margaret could see it, claiming she was just trying to help organize things. She convinced Margaret's old friends that she wasn't feeling well enough for visitors. Slowly, methodically, Angela isolated Margaret from everyone in her life except Angela herself. By September, Margaret barely spoke to anyone except the woman who'd moved into her guest room. And that's exactly what Angela wanted, because isolated people are easier to control. In September of 2020, Angela convinced Margaret to add her as a joint account holder on all her bank accounts. "Just in case something happens to you," Angela explained with perfect concern in her voice. "Someone needs to be able to pay your bills if you get sick and can't access your accounts." Margaret thought it made sense. Jennifer was all the way in California, and Angela was right here, helping her every single day. She signed the paperwork without hesitation. 1 month later in October, Angela persuaded Margaret to give her power of attorney for both healthcare and financial decisions. "What if you have a medical emergency and need someone to make decisions quickly?" Angela asked. "Jennifer is 3,000 miles away. It could take her hours or even days to get here. I'm right here. I can help." Again, Margaret agreed. It seemed logical, even responsible. She trusted Angela completely. By November, Angela had full legal control over every aspect of Margaret Harrison's life. She could access all her bank accounts, make medical decisions on her behalf, and manage her entire estate. Margaret thought she was just being prepared for emergencies. She had no idea she'd just handed her entire life over to a serial predator. On December 18, 2020, Angela brought a lawyer to Margaret's home. She'd carefully selected an attorney who worked out of a small office and didn't ask too many questions. The lawyer explained to Margaret that given everything Angela had sacrificed to care for her during the pandemic, and given that Jennifer was doing so well with her marketing career in California, it might make sense to update her will to reflect her current situation. "Your daughter is successful and financially secure," the lawyer said. "But Angela has put her own life on hold to be here for you. She has nothing." Margaret looked at Angela, who had tears in her eyes. Margaret thought about all the groceries Angela had brought, all the meals she'd cooked, all the loneliness she'd relieved during the most isolated time of Margaret's life. She thought about Jennifer, who called twice a week but was always so busy with work, who visited twice a year but seemed to have such an important life in California. And she made a decision that Angela had spent 6 months carefully engineering. Margaret signed a new will that day. The house would go to Angela. All savings accounts would go to Angela. All investment portfolios would go to Angela. Everything would go to Angela. Jennifer would receive a one-time payment of $50,000. Margaret felt good about the decision. She was taking care of someone who'd taken care of her. She had no idea she'd just signed away $3 million to a woman who'd been manipulating her since the day they met. But having the will wasn't enough for Angela Torres. Unlike her previous victims, Margaret still talked to Jennifer every week. And eventually, even from 3,000 miles away, Jennifer might notice something was wrong. Jennifer might ask questions. Jennifer might want to see the financial records or talk to her mother's doctor. Angela couldn't risk that. So in January of 2021, Angela began the final phase of her plan. She contacted an online telemedicine service and arranged for a prescription for sleeping medication. The doctor on the other end of the video call never met Margaret in person, never reviewed her full medical history, and certainly never cross-referenced the sleeping pills with the blood pressure medication Margaret had been taking for 10 years. Angela had researched this exact drug combination carefully. She'd used it 3 times before. When the sleeping medication was combined with common blood pressure medication that elderly people often take, it created a dangerous interaction. It caused kidney stress, heart arrhythmias, respiratory problems, and eventually organ failure. But it happened slowly enough that it looked like natural decline. It happened gradually enough that no one suspected foul play. It was the perfect murder because it didn't look like murder at all. By February of 2021, Margaret had started getting sick. She was tired all the time, sleeping 12 to 14 hours a day. She had no appetite and was losing weight rapidly. Her skin took on a grayish tone, and she could barely make it from her bedroom to the kitchen without needing to rest. During one of their video calls, Jennifer noticed immediately. "Mom, you don't look well," Jennifer said, genuine concern in her voice. "You need to see a doctor." Margaret waved off the worry with a weak smile. "I'm fine, honey. Just getting older. Angela is taking such good care of me." Angela, standing just off camera, smiled. Everything was going according to plan. Over the next 2 months, Margaret continued to deteriorate. The combination of medications was slowly shutting down her kidneys and putting massive strain on her heart. Her daughter begged her to come to California for treatment, offered to fly out to Connecticut, suggested specialists and second opinions. But Margaret refused every offer. She didn't want to be a burden, and besides, Angela was right, they're taking such wonderful care of her. On April 14, 2021, at 3:42 in the morning, Margaret Harrison's heart stopped. Angela waited until 6:47 that morning to call Jennifer. She was crying, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine grief. "I'm so sorry," Angela said through tears. "Your mother passed away peacefully in her sleep. She wasn't in any pain. I was with her until the end." The medical examiner who came to the house saw exactly what Angela wanted him to see. An elderly woman who'd been sick for months, declining naturally, and finally succumbed to heart failure. It was common for women her age. No autopsy was ordered. There was no reason to suspect anything. The death certificate read natural causes. Angela Torres had gotten away with it again. Jennifer Harrison was on a plane to Connecticut within hours of receiving the call. She arrived at her mother's house, the house where Angela was now living, 12 hours after her mother's death. Angela met her at the door with red eyes and a sympathetic expression. "Your mother loved you so much," Angela said, pulling Jennifer into a hug. "She talked about you all the time." Jennifer accepted the embrace stiffly, her mind already spinning with logistics. There was a funeral to plan, paperwork to file, family to notify. She moved through the next week in a fog of grief and responsibility. At the funeral 3 days later, Angela played her part perfectly. She greeted mourners, shared stories about Margaret's kindness, and cried at all the appropriate moments. She wore black, spoke softly, and positioned herself as the devoted caregiver who'd sacrificed everything to care for a woman she'd loved like her own mother. Jennifer stood quietly in the back of the church, barely speaking to anyone. She looked exactly like what Angela expected to see. A busy executive who'd been too caught up in her career to be there for her mother, now drowning in guilt and grief. At the reception after the funeral, Angela approached Jennifer with a plate of cookies. "Your mother was so proud of you," Angela said warmly. "She always talked about her daughter, who works in marketing out in California. You must be so successful." Jennifer looked at Angela for a long moment, her face completely neutral. "Thank you for taking care of her," Jennifer said quietly. "It must have been difficult." Angela dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "It was my honor," she said. "Your mother was like family to me." Jennifer nodded and turned away. Angela watched her go, satisfied. The rich marketing girl from California seemed harmless. She'd cry for a few weeks, sign the estate paperwork, take her $50,000, and go back to her life. Angela would keep the house, the $3 million, and disappear to her next victim. It was over. Except it wasn't. Because the moment Jennifer Harrison walked away from that conversation, she pulled out her phone and made a single call. "Marcus," she said to her head of security, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "I need a complete background check on someone named Angela Torres. Everything. Every address for the past 10 years, every job, every person she's known, every dollar she's ever touched." "How deep should we go, Miss Harrison?" Marcus asked. Jennifer Harrison, CEO of a $500 million empire, looked back at the reception where Angela was accepting condolences from mourners. "Scorched earth," Jennifer said. "I want to know what she ate for breakfast in 2015. 1 week after the funeral, Jennifer sat in an estate attorney's office in downtown Westport. The lawyer slid a folder across his desk with an expression that suggested he was delivering bad news. "Your mother's will is very clear, Miss Harrison," he said. "The house and all financial assets are to be transferred to Angela Torres. You will receive a one-time payment of $50,000. Jennifer opened the folder and read through every page carefully, her face showing no emotion. The lawyer watched her, clearly expecting tears or anger, or at least some kind of reaction. "When was this will signed?" Jennifer asked calmly. "December 18th, 2020, the lawyer replied. "For months before your mother passed away." "Was Angela Torres present when my mother signed this?" Jennifer asked. "Yes," the lawyer said, checking his notes. "Ms. Torres brought your mother to my colleague's office for the signing." Jennifer made a note on her phone. "I see," she said. "May I have copies of everything? The will, the power of attorney documents, all beneficiary designations." "Of course," the lawyer said, making copies. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Miss Harrison, I should tell you that your mother was of sound mind when she signed these documents. The will is ironclad. Contesting it would be very expensive and unlikely to succeed." Jennifer stood, collecting the documents. "Thank you for your time," she said, and walked out. The lawyer sat back in his chair, confused. That was the calmest reaction to disinheritance he'd ever seen. What he didn't know was that Jennifer Harrison wasn't in shock. She was in planning mode. And 48 hours later, she would know everything there was to know about Angela Torres. 2 days after the will reading, Jennifer Harrison was back in her corner office at Harrison Global Headquarters in San Francisco, working through emails, when her computer pinged with an encrypted message. The subject line read, "Angela Torres, complete dossier, confidential. You need to see this immediately." Jennifer opened the file and started reading. What she saw made her blood run cold. Angela Torres, age 43, no permanent address, no legitimate employment history for the past 8 years. But 7 previous addresses, all homes of elderly women. The investigator had compiled everything. Dorothy Klein, age 80, Sarasota, Florida, died March 2018 of heart failure, 6 months after Angela moved in. Left Angela $1.8 million. Patricia Chun, age 73, Scottsdale, Arizona, died August 2019 of kidney failure, 8 months after Angela moved in. Left Angela $2.1 million. Susan Foster, age 69, Austin, Texas, died November 2019 of respiratory failure, 7 months after Angela moved in. Left Angela $2.4 million. Barbara Williams, age 75, Portland, Oregon, died March 2020 of cardiac arrest, 6 months after Angela moved in. Left Angela $1.9 million. And now Margaret Harrison, age 72, Westport, Connecticut, died April 2021 of heart failure, 6 months after Angela moved in. Left Angela $3 million. 5 women, all dead within 6 to 8 months of Angela moving in, all ruled natural causes. All left Angela everything. The total take was $12.2 million. Jennifer leaned back in her chair and stared at the file for a long time. Most people would have called the police immediately. But Jennifer Harrison had built a $500 million empire by thinking strategically and acting decisively. She knew that if she went to the police right now with just this circumstantial evidence, Angela would probably walk. The wills were all legal, the deaths were all ruled natural causes, there was no direct proof of murder. Angela would hire lawyers, fight the charges, and might even win. And Jennifer Harrison had not built her fortune by accepting anything less than total victory. Jennifer picked up her phone and called her head of legal. "Sarah," she said, "I need you to clear my calendar for the next 3 months. Cancel everything that isn't absolutely critical." "What's going on?" Sarah asked, concerned. "I'm building a case," Jennifer said, "and I need the best forensic accountant in the country, the best team of private investigators, and the best criminal defense attorney who's willing to work on the prosecution side." "What's the budget?" Sarah asked. "Unlimited," Jennifer said. "I want this done right." Over the next 90 days, Jennifer Harrison did what she did best. She built an empire, but this time it wasn't a business empire. It was an empire of evidence. She hired the forensic accountant who'd helped bring down Enron, and within 2 weeks he'd traced every dollar Angela had stolen. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, shell companies in Delaware, real estate purchases under fake names in Miami and Las Vegas, luxury cars registered to LLCs. Angela had been living very well on stolen money. Jennifer hired 3 independent medical examiners to review every autopsy report from all 5 victims. What they found was damning. 6 of the 5 women had been prescribed the same sleeping medication in the months before their deaths. When combined with the blood pressure medication that all of them were taking, it created a lethal interaction that caused kidney failure, heart arrhythmias, and eventual organ shutdown. And every single prescription had come from the same online telemedicine service, a service that Angela had paid $300 per prescription to use. The pattern was undeniable and the method was clear. Angela Torres hadn't just manipulated these women. She'd systematically poisoned them. But Jennifer didn't stop there. She hired investigators to track down the children of the 4 previous victims, and she called each of them personally. "My name is Jennifer Harrison," she told each one. "I believe the woman who killed your mother also killed mine." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours, Jennifer was on a video conference call with 7 other grieving children, all of them telling the same story. Lonely parent during a vulnerable time, friendly caregiver who moved in, isolation from family, sudden health decline, quick death, inheritance to a stranger. Jennifer organized them into a coalition. She hired lawyers for all of them. She brought them together to compare notes, share medical records, and build a timeline that spanned 8 years in 7 states. By week 12, Jennifer had compiled a case file so comprehensive, so airtight, so meticulously documented that even the FBI couldn't ignore it. The file was over 800 pages long. It had cost her nearly $2 million to compile, and it was perfect. But Jennifer still didn't call the FBI. Not yet, because there was one more thing she wanted to do first. She wanted Angela Torres to know exactly who had destroyed her life. She wanted the whole world to know. So on November 15th, 2021, at exactly 6 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, Jennifer Harrison sent the entire case file to CNN, NBC News, the New York Times, and the FBI simultaneously. Within 1 hour, the story was trending on every major news platform. CNN ran the headline: "Serial inheritance scammer stole $12 million from 5 elderly victims." NBC News led with, "FBI opens investigation into multi-state elder abuse ring." And every single story featured the same photograph, Angela Torres. Within 3 hours, the story was the #1 trending topic on Twitter. Within 6 hours, it was being discussed on every cable news network in America. And at 7:23 that morning, Angela Torres woke up in Margaret Harrison's bed, in Margaret Harrison's house, to 37 missed calls on her phone. Angela picked up her phone groggily, confused by the number of notifications. Then she saw the Google alert she'd set up years ago for her own name. Her hands started shaking as she opened it. The headlines were everywhere. Her photo was on every news site. Her name was being broadcast across the country. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the name at the bottom of every article. Evidence compiled and provided by Jennifer Harrison, CEO of Harrison Global. Angela stared at that name for a long moment. Jennifer Harrison, the quiet marketing executive from California. The grieving daughter who'd barely spoken at the funeral. Angela opened a new browser window with trembling fingers and typed, "Jennifer Harrison CEO." The search results loaded, and Angela's world ended. Forbes, Jennifer Harrison, 48, net worth $500 million. Business Insider. Harrison Global CEO named one of Silicon Valley's most powerful women. Wall Street Journal. The Shark. How Jennifer Harrison built a $500 million empire. Page after page of results. Photos of Jennifer in power suits shaking hands with world leaders. Jennifer on magazine covers. Jennifer commanding boardrooms full of executives. Jennifer giving keynote speeches to thousands of people. This wasn't a marketing executive. This was one of the most powerful women in American business. And Angela had stolen her mother's inheritance. Angela's coffee mug slipped from her hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. She scrolled frantically through more articles, each one worse than the last. Angela had spent 6 months stealing from a woman whose daughter could have bought and sold Angela's entire operation 1,000 times over. A woman who had the resources to hire armies of investigators. A woman who had the connections to call the FBI directly. A woman who was literally famous for destroying anyone who crossed her. And Angela had stolen her mother's $3 million. The doorbell rang. Angela's heart stopped. She walked slowly to the front door and looked through the peephole. FBI agents. Multiple cars. Bulletproof vests. Badges. The knock came again, louder this time. Angela Torres, this is the FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest. Open the door now. Angela backed away from the door, her legs giving out, sliding down the wall to the floor. This couldn't be happening. She'd done this 5 times before. 5 times without getting caught. But she'd never stolen from a billionaire before. And billionaires, as she was learning, play by different rules. The FBI broke down the door 30 seconds later. Angela Torres was arrested on 23 counts of elder abuse, fraud, financial exploitation, and practicing medicine without a license. As they put her in handcuffs and led her out of the house, news cameras were everywhere. Every major network was there. Helicopters overhead. Reporters shouting questions. Angela Torres, the woman who'd spent 8 years operating in the shadows, was now on every screen in America. The arrest was broadcast live on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and every local station. As the FBI vehicle drove away from Margaret Harrison's house, Angela looked out the window, and that's when she saw it. A black town car parked across the street. The same car that had been at the funeral. The window rolled down. Jennifer Harrison sat in the back seat, looking directly at Angela. Not crying, not celebrating, just watching. Their eyes met through the window of the FBI vehicle. For 5 seconds, they stared at each other. In that moment, Angela Torres understood. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about justice. This was personal. Jennifer gave one small nod. A gesture that said everything. I know what you did. I know who you are. And I destroyed you. The town car window rolled up. The car drove away. And Angela Torres, sitting in handcuffs in the back of an FBI vehicle, knew she would never see freedom again. The trial began in March of 2022 and lasted 3 months. The prosecution presented the case that Jennifer Harrison's team had built. 9 victims, $14 million, systematic poisoning, serial predation. 7 families testified, each one telling the same story. Lonely parent, pandemic isolation, friendly caregiver, sudden death, inheritance to stranger. Jennifer Harrison attended every single day of the trial. She sat in the front row, wearing designer power suits and expensive jewelry, making sure Angela could see her, making sure Angela understood exactly who she was. When Jennifer testified, she didn't cry. She spoke in the same clear, commanding voice she used when addressing shareholders and closing billion-dollar deals. Angela Torres targeted my mother because she thought I was too far away to notice, too busy to care, too powerless to fight back, Jennifer said, looking directly at Angela. She was wrong on all 3 counts. I noticed. I cared. And I spent $2 million of my own money to make sure she would never do this to anyone else's family. Angela's lawyers advised her not to take the stand. There was nothing she could say that would help her case. The evidence was overwhelming. The pattern was undeniable. The jury deliberated for exactly 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. On all 23 counts, we find the defendant guilty. The families erupted in tears and relief. Angela Torres showed no emotion. The judge sentenced her to 18 years in federal prison. As the marshals led Angela out of the courtroom, she looked back one last time at Jennifer Harrison. Jennifer was standing now, collecting her briefcase and her coat, not even looking in Angela's direction. She was already moving on. For Jennifer Harrison, This was just another victory, another problem solved, another enemy destroyed. She'd built an empire by winning, and she always won. In a recent interview, a reporter asked her if she thought justice had been served. Jennifer smiled that cold smile her competitors knew well. Angela Torres will spend the next 18 years in a federal prison cell, Jennifer said. I spent $2 million to put her there. My mother's life was worth far more than that. So yes, justice was served. The reporter then asked what Jennifer would say to Angela Torres if she could speak to her now. Jennifer looked directly at the camera. I'd say thank you, she said. The reporter looked confused. Thank you? Yes, Jennifer said. Thank you for underestimating me. Thank you for assuming I was just a marketing executive. Thank you for thinking I was too busy or too powerless to notice what you did to my mother. Because that underestimation gave me the element of surprise. And in business, and in revenge, surprise is everything. Jennifer stood from her desk, signaling the interview was over. Angela Torres spent her entire adult life preying on people she thought were weak. She finally met someone stronger, and it destroyed her. Angela Torres is now 6 years into her 18-year sentence. She's 49 years old and will be 61 when she's released. Most of the money was never recovered. Angela had spent it on a lifestyle that's now a distant memory. She spends 23 hours a day in a small cell, thinking about the decision that destroyed her life. Meanwhile, Jennifer Harrison continues building her empire. Her company is worth over $600 million now. She's more powerful than ever. She was recently named one of the 50 most influential people in business by Time magazine. And she keeps a photo of her mother on her desk, a reminder of why she built the Margaret Harrison Foundation and why she'll never stop fighting for elderly Americans who can't fight for themselves. So here's the question I want you to think about. Was Jennifer Harrison's revenge justified? She spent $2 million of her own money, mobilized teams of investigators and lawyers, and used her considerable power and influence to send Angela Torres to prison for 18 years. Was that justice? Or was it revenge dressed up as justice? The truth is probably somewhere in between. Jennifer Harrison didn't just want Angela Torres in prison. She wanted the world to know what Angela had done. She wanted Angela to understand that she'd stolen from the wrong family. And she got exactly what she wanted. Angela Torres will spend the next 12 years behind bars. She lost everything: her freedom, her money, her anonymity, her future. The lesson here isn't complicated. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never assume you know someone's power. Never judge someone by their appearance or their demeanor or what you think their life is like. The person who seems harmless might be the most dangerous person you'll ever meet. There's a bigger lesson here too, one that goes beyond this specific case. Elder financial abuse is an epidemic in America. 1 in 10 seniors over the age of 60 experiences some form of financial exploitation. That's 5 million people. Every year, $28 billion is stolen from elderly Americans by people they trust. Family members, caregivers, friends, neighbors, strangers who befriend them during vulnerable times. 90% of cases are never reported because victims are ashamed, because they don't realize it's happening until it's too late, because by the time anyone finds out, the money is gone and the abuser has moved on. There are thousands of elderly victims whose families don't have resources. Families who can't spend $2 million building a case. Families who go to the police and are told there's nothing that can be done. The legal system often fails elder abuse victims because the crimes are hard to prove, because the perpetrators are careful to make everything look legal. Jennifer Harrison could have taken her $2 million and done anything with it. She could have bought another house, invested it in her company, donated it to any number of worthy causes. Instead, she spent it destroying the woman who killed her mother. And then she spent $10 million more making sure what happened to her mother doesn't happen to other people's families. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as compelling as I did, let me know in the comments what you think. Was Jennifer's revenge justified? Would you have done the same thing? And have you or anyone you know ever dealt with elder financial abuse? Share your stories. Let's start a conversation about how we can protect our elderly loved ones from predators like Angela Torres. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about revenge, justice, and the hidden power of people who seem ordinary, make sure you subscribe to this channel. And in the next story, I'll tell you about the husband who mocked his wife's little boutique. He didn't know she owned the building his company was leasing, and she was about to evict them.